we're gonna go over conditioning, something we completely rehauled last year, and you know, we obviously I'm always trying to read and learn and grow, and really just found a lot of errors and a lot of things we could do a lot better with our conditioning program. So this summer we made a ton of changes there. We actually conditioned less total volume. I would say from on a difficulty standpoint for our guys, it was much less difficult than it has been in the past, and we got way more out of it. So excited to explain to you guys why exactly that is physiologically, and the results we got. But first, I have a couple of really big announcements. Number one, you guys are gonna listen to this because it's my show. So first, I got engaged, so that's a huge thing for me. Getting married in July in Spain, so that's a big thing. And then a really big change for us here in this room as well. Mama Gildersleeve spoke, and she complained about of my vulgarness sometimes, and I know I'm a little rough around the edges. It's something I don't deny, but it's something I do want to work on. So Curriculum Nation, we're going to work on this together, and what we're doing is no more F-bombs in the office, and we're going to try to get rid of profanity and be a little more professional. So that's a step we're taking. So you can see we have our F-bombs, and what we're doing is we're totaling these, and it's 10 push-ups per, and at the end of the week after our Friday blow up, you're responsible for hitting all push-ups in a row. So it's not on the spot, but it's a cumulative effect. And on Fridays, you're going to pay the penalty right after our big bench day. You're going to have to bang out all those push-ups. So we're going to try to make it better. So we're working on that. So if you guys want to join us in that path, be more than happy to follow us. So, all right. So back to the point here. So conditioning. So the first thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about energy systems. So when you guys think about football, our sport, our specific sport, what are the energy systems that we're going to work? What's our main energy system? What would you guys say? Just answer a question, you know?
Alactic.
Okay, so alactic. And what would be another energy system that we rely on?
Your aerobic system.
What? You said aerobic with the game of football?
Yeah, aerobic system.
So you're
aerobic
telling
capacity.
me we have to train aerobic capacity as a football player?
Yes, sir.
Why?
Developing your aerobic capacity also helps with how you recover between the bouts of energy between plays and with everything else that you're doing. So.
All right. So most people don't really realize that the aerobic system is a big portion of our game. You know, obviously there's 12 play drives where we have a 6-second snap and 15-second recovery, and then they do it again and again and again and again for 12 straight plays, which could be, you know, over a 8-9 minute span. And obviously the more plays in a row that we do with a lower amount of recovery, we start switching from anaerobic to really piecing up over onto our aerobic side of it. So when I look at aerobic and anaerobic, these two main systems that we're really gonna, you know, these are the two main ones we're really gonna focus on when we talk about this. We break down anaerobic into which two pieces?
Lactic and alactic.
I would, you can, but I would say for how do we break them up in our conditioning program?
Your intensive, extensive tempos.
No. TJ, you already hit on it a little bit.
Lactic. Alactic.
Alactic, but what pieces of alactic? There's two main things we have to improve.
Capacity.
And
Power.
right, okay. So we have, and I just put aerobic, anaerobic. We don't really use this term too much. We call this alactic, but I just feel like whenever I talk about this, if I don't put anaerobic when I talk about alactic, that we're going to think they're two different energy systems, which they're not, okay? So we break down alactic into really two pieces. Okay, so we have alactic power, we have alactic capacity. Okay, now when we talk about the aerobic system, what are our two main pieces?
capacity.
Power
Aerobic
capacity.
capacity, aerobic power.
Aerobic power and aerobic capacity. So I'm gonna think about it the same way. Okay, so this is kind of the pieces that we have to understand. Okay, so when I talk about alactic power, what am I talking about?
Lift.
Could be lifting. What else?
Just anything like fast pace.
Not necessarily. Give me more detail.
Flyos.
Plyos.
Sleds, hill sprints.
Sprinting. What would be my timeline there
What are
before I would flip out of alactic power?
they?
They said about 6 seconds. Okay, so anything less than 6 seconds, okay, is going to be us training alactic power. Okay, and then we talk about alactic capacity. What is that?
Doing it over and over again.
It's the ability to produce the power over and over and over again, and increase our alactic capacity so that we aren't necessarily flipping it and producing a lot of lactic acid or having to rely on our aerobic system too much. So those general concepts, okay, I think we're all pretty good on aerobic. We understand what aerobic capacity is, just how much can you handle, how much can you go. I think we're pretty good there. This is kind of where we focus on, okay? So how we kind of work our conditioning program here. So kind of that's the main piece of it. Okay, so we attack our power by our lifting plyos and our sprints. Okay, capacity wise, does everyone have one of these? I gave everyone one of these. You have one. We kind of break this thing into two different with our actual conditioning wise. Now, both these, so our two conditioning templates are what?
Linear.
Lateral.
Intensive and extensive.
Extensive and intensive. Okay, now these are not, this is a separate now, okay, it doesn't mean that's under aerobic, okay? Now these are both technically aerobic in nature, okay? An extensive tempo is gonna be about 75% of my max velocity. An intensive tempo is gonna be about 85% of my max velocity. Okay, so obviously the difference in these tempos is just this. If I go out and run a 5 mile jog, am I working my aerobic capacity? Am I working my aerobic capacity if I go out and do a 5 mile jog?
Yeah.
Yes, I am. What is my max velocity? Probably like 15%, right? So am I working at a speed that's relatively similar to the game of football? Okay, so there's the first thing that we want to talk about is that your conditioning, you want it to mimic the energy systems, but also the speeds at which you're gonna play. Now, obviously, when we condition, we can't do bouts of 100% sprinting over and over again, because if we did, what would happen? What would we flip into? We'd flip into lactic, right? We would start developing a ton of lactic acid. We wouldn't be able to filter, because our intensity would be too high, we wouldn't be able to filter out the lactic acid at the rate that we were producing it, okay? So we drop down these intensities, all right, and then we program from there, all right? So first off, before I get completely into that, your anaerobic capacity is directly correlated with your aerobic capacity, okay? So how I like to think about this is ceilings, all right? So if I just constantly train anaerobically, and that's the only way I condition, your anaerobic capacity will only increase so much, okay? And this is the best place I like he talks about this is Tudor Bumpa and periodization. There's a section in there that you guys should definitely read. But he talks about this correlation, anaerobic and aerobic capacities, and how by increasing your aerobic capacity, your aerobic ceiling, you give yourself the ability to have a much higher anaerobic capacity. So in our conditioning program, it takes approximately 2 weeks to increase your aerobic capacity. So we really focus on our first 2 weeks. So if you look at the first 2 weeks of our program, that's when we're gonna do high aerobic training with lower total max velocity. So we'll run fists, we'll run double fists, we'll run bouncers. We'll run longer volume sprints that are lower in speed. It's going to be a faster, what's going to be a slower pace, but less recovery. So we're really focusing on these first 2 weeks. So that's our first, in our summer conditioning program, that's week 1 through 2, is really focused on aerobic capacity, okay? Now, obviously, at the same time, year-round, summer-round, we're always focusing on this. We're always training that, but not really emphasizing lactic capacity the first couple weeks of summer. We're emphasizing training our alactic power, so we're doing our sprints, we're doing our jumps, we're doing our lifting, and then we're coming up, we're doing our longer distance running for those first 2 weeks. And that's going to be our main emphasis, okay? Because like I said, so the thought process there is we increase the aerobic capacity, then later in the summer, by us increasing the aerobic capacity, it'll give us a chance to increase this much more than if we just jumped right into alactic capacity training, okay? And then the reason we do it for 2 weeks is that's just what I've found is what it takes for us to really affect aerobic capacity and get our guys' work capacity, an overall work capacity up, okay? So that's what the first 2 weeks of summer conditioning look like. So if you look at our program, you see aerobic capacity phase 1. That lasts 3 total weeks. So week 1 through 2 is heavily aerobic. Like I said, it's fifths, it's doubles, it's long distance running, it's getting aerobic capacity up. That's our main emphasis. We're not too worried about these tempos or these percentages at that point in time. All right. From there, we shift into week 3, which is the end of phase 1. Okay, so this whole thing is phase 1 of summer conditioning program. All right, so the first 2 weeks is aerobic capacity. Week 3 is what we call our transition week. Okay, I don't like guys going straight from running longer distances, fifths, double fifths, 300-yard shuttles. I don't like them going straight into that stuff right into high velocity sprints. So I want to transition them slowly down, okay? So we'll have 1 week where we'll shift from those longer distance laps around the field, like I said, 300-yard shuttles, and our 3rd week is more of half gassers, things that are longer in nature, maybe some different shuttle variations, but the max velocities are going up. So we're getting closer to, we're working above, 60% speed, max velocity. So we're getting closer, okay? And then we shift into our phase 2 of conditioning, okay? So phase 2 of conditioning is extensive tempos. When I'm in my phase 2, my extensive conditioning, we are trying to really train as smart as we can, okay? So the first thing I'm gonna program off of, I'm gonna program off of total volume. So our goal is we wanna get our football team ready to play football and what they're gonna have to do in a game. Okay, so we've researched what our averages are as far as total volume travel, all right? So we have our bigs, and what our average bigs, what a game looks like for them is 1,200 yards of movement, okay? For our mids, what our average total volume looks like for them is 2,000 yards. And obviously this is give and take a little bit based off positions, but this is how we condition them as well. And then for our skills, our average, what we're looking for, is per game is 2,200 yards, okay? So our goal is by the end of this extensive tempo phase is to have these guys, by the end of the summer, which is gonna include the intensive as well, is this is what we're looking for, 1,200, 2,000, 2,200, for them to be able to go out and crush that volume like it's nothing, okay? So, let me tell you guys what I used to do wrong, and this is the simplest way to explain this, okay? So, for our skills, all right, if we ran 10 hundreds, how many total yards is that?
1,000.
Okay, it's 1,000 yards. All right, if I were to run 10 in a row, all right, I can work a large amount of aerobic or alactic power and alactic capacity for 4 to 6 of those reps. Why do I say 4 to 6? Why not 7 to 8? What happens after that 6th rep?
Start getting aerobic.
We start becoming heavily lactic and heavily aerobic, right? So we're no longer training optimally, right? Now this is what I used to do, and that's what you see too, obviously. You see what happened to the max velocity at that 7th rep. What happens to max velocity?
Goes down.
It goes down, right? Guys can't keep up, they can't run with the pace. So they're overstriding, they're overrunning. What also happens usually from 7 to 10?
They start fatiguing and detraining more.
Yes, so CNS is definitely very high intense. And then what else?
Injuries.
Injuries, right? I've never seen a guy have a soft tissue injury from 4 to 6. Now that once I read, and this is all Charlie Francis stuff. Once I read this, I was like, man, I've never seen a guy from 1 to 6 get an injury. I've always seen them once we stretch these 110s or these 100s out further and further. That's when you start to get them injured. Okay, so our conditioning program is the exact same it's always been, except for now, instead of me going 10 100s as an example for our skills, all right, they'll run 2 sets of 5 by 100s. Okay, so we're gonna run 2 sets of 5 100s. What's my total volume?
1,000 yards.
Okay, it's still 1,000 yards, so the volume is the exact same. All right, I'm cutting down. I'm in this 4 to 6 zone. So what's gonna happen? My max velocity,
Stays.
it's gonna be able to stay high, which correlates more to my sport. I'm gonna be able to train a little more alactic power. I'm gonna be able to stay alactic capacity, not really flip into that lactic threshold. Okay, and I'm gonna be able to continue to, because like I said, these are both aerobic in nature, but it's just more tailored to my sport. It's more specific to my sport to do 100s and do them, like I said, 5 by 10 instead of 100, or instead of 10 by 10. Like I said, so I can keep the velocities higher at a closer correlated percentage to what I'm totally running. Okay. So phase 2 extensive tempos. If you just look on our sheet here, you guys can kind of see how this works. So skills, mids, and bigs, they all have different volume. They all have different yardage. So everyone's running something different. The bigs are running, 30s, 20s, and 10s. The skills are running 60s, 40s, 30s, so on and so forth. So how this will look is they'll go out there and they'll do a setup, 5 to 10. We'll work a 1 to 3 work to rest on these 5 reps, okay? And then we'll give them full recovery between. So really, and you guys have heard me talk about this before, full recovery to me is I'm gonna look at their body language, and that's, I give you time, and typically it's between 2 and 3 minutes. Some days are different. Some days their CNSs are fired up, some days they're not, but I'm gonna get them fully recovered so that our velocities can return right back at it. So the main difference between what I used to do and what we did this summer, okay, is the volume stayed the same. That didn't change. We did that research like 4 years ago. I knew that I wanted to condition our team to the exact same volume they would have in the game, or really a little bit more. I wanted to put them in a tough, long game situation. I wanted to make sure we were prepared for that by the time we left summer. Okay, so that didn't change. The repetitions changed, and then I increased the times to match this. So I just took my guys' average 40s. I did a calculation to set them out to the distances. And then I set our times to be faster to match this. So what maybe used to would be 9 seconds to make a time is now 8 seconds, or maybe 8.5. And so I did that with the average of our entire team, and that's how I calculated our times so that our velocities were staying at this high. Okay. Now obviously the difference between extensive tempo and intensive tempo is what mainly? Is the intensity. Okay. So if intensity increases, what happens to neural fatigue? What happens to muscular fatigue? It increases. So everything goes up. What happens to central nervous system fatigue? It goes up. Okay, so that's my main thing. So when we get to intensive tempos, we do these a little differently than what Francis talks about. I kind of manipulate them to be specific to our game. Obviously, in the game of football, is every drive 4 to 6 plays? It's not. So we have to prepare our guys for that. Okay, so I use this phase 2 in summertime, which is 3 weeks, I believe. 3 weeks. So this is another 3-week cycle. Okay, and it goes through, like I said, the tempos that I just talked about. When we get into intensive tempos, I make this extremely sports specific. Okay, so intensive tempos are going to flip to become position specific. Okay, so our receivers might be running post routes, our linemen are pushing prowlers, our defensive backs are shadowing routes, our linebackers are going through agility bags. So everybody's doing something sports specific once we get here. It's no more linear sprints. Okay, we keep the speed high. I mean, we really ask them to go max velocity. But what we're doing is I make them go 10 plays in a row. So I try to prepare them for those situations that aren't going to be 4 to 6 reps. Okay, so this is the last 3 weeks of summer. So this is going to get us prepped mainly through, or get them prepped fully for what's about to come. Like I said, game time. So kind of have your adjustment here. These are all 4 to 6 reps. Okay, so you have multiple sets multiple sets of 4 to 6 reps. Here we'll have multiple sets of 10 plus, okay? So we're getting them ready for those different drives. So, you know, I think your first workout is 4 sets of 10. Yeah, okay. So your first set, the first thing we do the week 1 intensive tempos is we do 4 sets of 10 by whatever that is. That might be prowler pushes, that might be post routes, shadow, agility bags, but it's 4 sets of 10 and it's quick. It's just like a game. So our game speeds, our averages are 6 seconds on and 29 seconds off, okay? So when we had stopwatches out there my second year here, and we clocked every play throughout the entire season, and you know, I wanted to see what our averages were at Akron. So that's our averages. We're 6 seconds on, we're 29 seconds off. That's our average play, okay? So our drill, whether it's a prowler, a post route, whatever it may be, I want them moving for close to 6 seconds. I'm gonna give them 29 seconds rest. They're gonna do this 10 times, and then I'm gonna give them full recovery, just like a game, okay? So it's very similar to a game. Now, is this the coin term of intensive tempos? Harris, is this technically intensive tempos? No, it's not technically intensive tempos, because an intensive tempo is still technically, you know, they want, if you read it textbook wise, it's still 4 to 6 reps. Because once again, what happens once you get past the 6 rep?
Increase your fatigue.
What happens in max velocity?
Goes down.
What happens in neural fatigue?
Goes up.
What happens in overall intensity? It goes up, right? It's harder. It's harder on my body, okay? And then you just have to understand, once we shift past 6 reps, this, which is our main energy system here, we start to shift away from this, and we start to shift more into our aerobic stuff, which it doesn't correlate as much to our game. So, more or less, and Harris, you can help me with this, just to refresh my memory, but so in Applied Sprint Training, this book, if you haven't read it, great book by James Smith. I mean, he's a very smart guy, but he pretty much summarizes a ton of Charlie Francis' work. But more or less, when I was reading his research, is what he found was when he trained extensively, intensively only, and didn't do you know, long distance running, whatever it may be, he was able to increase guys' overall speed, so their alactic power. He was able to increase their alactic capacity, and he was able to increase their aerobic capacity all at the same time by training like this. Green, what happens when we just train aerobically to alactic power? What's that relationship?
It'll go down. It's an inverse
It's an
relationship.
inverse relationship, right? So if aerobic capacity does this, Sophia, what happens to alactic power?
Down.
Okay, it goes down. So do we want that? No, we need both those things in our sport.
Yeah.
So that's really when this would just hit me like a ton of bricks. It was just like, what are we doing? You know, if we're training that 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th rep twice a week, every week, and we're trying to get bigger, faster, and stronger, what the heck are we doing? You know? So, you know, yeah, there's ways like destroy your guys and get the whole mentally tough thing. That's just not a very smart way to do it. So anyways, fast forward, once we did this program. So we used to condition twice a week. We only conditioned once a week this off season, this summer. We cut our overall sprints in half, okay, our volume of sprints, so our alactic power work. All right, we trained like this. So for me, I always had to bite my tongue. It was always tough because I'd be looking at our team and they'd run 5 sprints and they'd stand there like this and look at me. And I would just be like, this isn't how conditioning's supposed to be. It's supposed to be way harder than this. And they would just smoke it. And they do their second set, and they do their third set, and they do their fourth set. And they were just always, you know, they recovered much faster from the workouts. Their preparedness for the next day's training was through the roof. So overall, it was completely different. We did much less and got much more out of it than we had before. No hamstrings, no hips, we had no muscular, no soft tissue injuries going through conditioning. So like I said, we did less and got much larger result from it. So in a nutshell, that's kind of the general changes that we made in our conditioning program on that stuff, is there any, and you can go back as far as you guys need to, but any questions on any piece of that?
Well, so I know you want to work on both the anaerobic and the aerobic. So the way that you focus more on the aerobic, so it wouldn't do the inverse relationship, was just more sport specific things because of the intensive. Is that what you're
Yes, I
saying?
mean, like I said, everything, when we look at our program, every phase, you have to think of it like a coffee cup. You know, you can't pour everything in. So if you can't say, I want to emphasize strength, power, and conditioning all at the same time. If you do that, you're going to overflow your cup. You guys are going to overtrain. So you have to understand that if you're going to emphasize aerobic capacity, well, then other things have to give. So, you know, during our aerobic capacity phase, we match that up with our hypertrophy. So we're working, not only working work capacity on the field, we're working work capacity in here as well. Reps are at sets of 10s and 12s, tempo is higher. So we're trying to set that work capacity and marinate that steak for the entire summer. So that all happens there. So we understand that first phase,
Yeah.
I know that we're suffering a little bit. I get that, but I'm okay with that
Yeah.
because it's like I said, it's all based off phases. We get into phase 2. Well, now we gotta start getting. We want to emphasize power and strength. You know, that's very important. So overall volume goes down, and that's where this is so good because I don't have to worry about this inverse relationship with aerobic capacity and power because this is extensive tempo allows me to improve both. So I can do this, okay? And that's what I'm saying. The way we used to train, I didn't get that. Now it wasn't a huge inverse because we're not out there running miles and stuff. But the difference when we switched to this is our aerobic capacity went up, our power and our strength went up
Okay.
by switching to this. Whereas, you know, you might get, depending on what you do, you might get, you know, one of those, or you might get one of those relationships, you know. But you know, I've never had this before until this summer, where I could literally look at our guys and be like, their work capacity is continuing to go up, they're getting stronger, they're getting faster. So yeah, that's how we combat that. Now once we get to here, okay, that's when, like I said, you pour some of your cup. So I know my main goal of phase 3 of summer is what, guys?
Power.
Capacity, power.
Generally, what is my main phase? What is my main goal? I want everybody to do what?
Get ready for
Play
camp.
I want to get them ready to play football, right? I know that day 1 of camp, what are our coaches going to do?
Run the dirt out.
The highest volume of practice are which 4 days? First 4. Okay, so for you listeners, the highest volume practices, and this is I got this information from a guy at Ignition, APG Ignition, who used to do all the analytics for the Bengals and for Minnesota, the Gophers, and he had ran the GPSs and gotten a bunch of information from other schools around the country. And like I said, the highest 4 volume days of practice over an entire year, football season, spring ball, was the first 4 days of camp. Okay, so how I told the coaches this summer is I said that'd be like me coming in here after the guys are off on winter break for 4 or 5 weeks, depending on when our bowl game is, and saying, all right, boys, day 1, let's do max effort back squats. Let's max out. I want to see what your 1 rep max is today. What's probably gonna happen?
Everything.
CNS is going to be fried.
Injury.
Tons of injuries. And yet we do that day 1 of camp every freaking year, okay? So now I will definitely say this. Our coaches were so much better this year. I think when I finally put it that way and I needed that information to share with them, they were much better on how we kind of leaned our guys into it. But that's my goal. So phase 3, I don't want to get to camp and all of a sudden that day 1 comes and our guys aren't ready for it. So unfortunately, it kind of cuts 3 weeks out of our program because, you know, what takes a back seat to this? Our strength, right? What else? Our power. Really what we're trying to do there at this point in time is this. You know, I understand that if we push for this, we're probably going to overtrain at that point. So what I'm trying to do is I'm really, you know, the power we've maintained, I'm trying to build a little bit or maintain it, and then we're trying to really hammer home on this, and get our guys ready to run and play freaking football, because that's what we do the first, you know, 4 days of camp. And like I said, this camp, we didn't have, you know, musculoskeletal issues, we didn't have soft tissue issues at all. And part of it is because of this. obviously part of it is because our coaches are compliant with listening to it. So that's kind of the main, like I said, when we sit down and write our summer program, before we do anything, we write out what's our main, what's our intent here, what's our intent here, what's our intent here. Now, it doesn't mean we're always training the whole facet, and that's something I believe in, a well-balanced program. So we're always hitting a piece of everything. We're never just gonna say, okay, this is power only, screw strength. This is strength only, screw power. We're always gonna be trained, but there's always gonna be an emphasis of each phase, if that makes sense. And that's how that works. What else? What other questions?
Looking back at this summer, what would be, talk about changing a little bit at a time. What would be, one thing that you think you could change, or if you would change anything at all?
Yeah, so I mean, we've talked about this. So right now, I'll write out our skill progression for you guys, just so they can see on. So if you look at our skill progression, okay, working extensive and intensive. So we got week. So like I said, we have our 1, 2, 3. This is all aerobic capacity. Okay, and that's everybody. All right, and then this for our skills here. 4, 5, 6. Okay, so this is our extensive tempos. So that's 75% max velocity, and that's what we're working 4, 5, 6. Here's their workouts, okay? So it's 6 110s, it's 6 60s, it's 2x6 40s, and it's 4 30s. Okay, that progresses to 2x4 110s, 2x4 60s, 2x6 40s. Okay, that progresses to 2x5 110s, 2x4 50s, 2x6 40s. Okay, and then the last, we got 7 and 8 and 9 didn't really happen, but we'll just put it there. And this is intensive. So what's my percentages? 85 and up of max velocity. All right, and this is where we went to position specific. Okay, so that's on the other sheet, guys, for just so you can see that. And this is where, like I said, they did 4x10 post routes, 4x10, 1x11. So that was 40 total plays. That was 51 total plays, and then 6x10. That was 60 plays. Okay, and this was, like I said, the 6 seconds on, 29 seconds off thing from here over. Okay. So for me, obviously this is much more sport specific. I would love to go out there and keep the volumes lower. So, the 110s, our guys are never going to run 110 yards. So to me, when I think about that, every step over 40 to 60, I'd say 60 yards on the long end, is extra stress on their body that they don't need. So then I thought about this before we started summer. So why would we do 110s? And it's one thing everyone has to remember is it's not just about how exhausting the exercise is. What's the other piece of it that's also really important? How hard they think it is. You understand what I'm saying? Like, it's on their CNS. Yes, what we actually do to them is what taxes their CNS. But if they think something is very difficult, it's going to be very difficult. Okay, so when I did the math, the first program I wrote had no 110s in it. It was 60s, and that was it. It was 60s and below. So this first work, I'll just give an example. So it was like 3 sets of 6 60s, and then 2 sets of 6 40s, and then 4 30s. Okay, so I was just out there thinking, all right. So this is 6, 12, 14. This is 18 total sprints. This first one, okay? This one we actually did, Okay, this is 18, 24, 30. This is 34 total sprints. Okay, and you guys knowing our guys, which one of those would they think is harder?
34 reps.
34 reps. That's all they're gonna see. Because it doesn't mean that at Florida State, maybe this doesn't phase their. Maybe their athletes are different than our guys are. But our guys see 34 reps and they go, holy shit. Dang it. Profanity, sorry, Mom. They go 34 reps. Holy cow. That's like way more than we've ever done before, Coach. I don't want to do 34. So for me, just knowing the transition of what I just knew this would be a much smoother transition into it. Now next summer, maybe we will go to this. You know, maybe at that point in time, because I know they understand the whys, they know what we're doing, and I'll say, hey, we're gonna do more sprints, we're gonna do less distance because it's gonna save your guys' legs in the long run. Not doing as much pounding. We'll be able to keep the velocities higher, which are similar to your sport, so on and so forth. So, you know, I think I'd rather do that, but at the same time, it's the exact same volume. I'm not going to change the volume. The velocities, obviously, at a 60 versus a 110, they're higher. You're just not holding them for as long. So, you know, maybe that would flare more guys up than not. You know, I don't know the answer. I haven't ever done it before that way. But in my head, I'd say if I were gonna, I mean, this definitely was what I'm considering changing, is keeping everybody 60 yards and lower. I think we'll probably do it. It's definitely what's going through my head. I mean, and at the same time, though, you think, well, man, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But also, if it ain't broke, break it and make it better is also, you know, another concept that you got to think about too. So, it was definitely the best conditioning program we ever had. But I don't really care about that. I want it to be the best it could possibly be. So if the 60s can make it better, it's definitely, you can't tell me it's not more sport specific as far as total volume, distance traveled. And do guys really need to run, you know, 110 yards? Do guys really need to run 60 yards? Would be the question. So that's the main thing I would want to change, if I could. Folks, you want to go start those guys, please? All right, what else? What other questions? Because this is a massively misunderstood piece of our field. And so, like, just to even think about, you guys, you know, talk about volume. When we went out, I've said this before, and even with the aerobic power stuff, or the aerobic power stuff, when we went and saw Louis Simmons this summer, you know, he thought, obviously he never sprints his athletes, and they still find a way to get faster. I obviously don't agree with that, but there's definitely a big piece of it is when you look at, so Charlie Francis, and one of the biggest things that I've taken away from Charlie Francis is, you know, when he was coming up in this thing, everybody just did a ton of sprints. I mean, they did a freaking ton of volume, and he took Tudor Bumpa's ideology of less is more. And as soon as he cut his volume down, his guys' sprints, all of his athletes, male and female, got significantly faster. Okay, well, as soon as we cut down our volume on sprint, I mean, we literally cut our volume in half this summer of what we've done in the past as far as overall sprints. I mean, I'm talking, we did 3 to 4 max effort sprints a day. And that, by max effort, I mean max velocity. So these guys running at 100% of their total velocities. We would do 3 to 4 sub-max pulls. So that would be like a sled pull, a sled drag, a heavy sled drag, so 60% of their body weight and up. And then we would do 3 to 4 repetitions of a hill sprint, which would be 15 total yards, and that's very sub-maximal velocities. They're not running at nearly max velocities. So 12 total sprints, 3 max effort, and our guys' times, our 30-yard splits, we need to get a percentage on that so I can rattle that off better. But I think our average split decreased over 1/10 of a second. Was it 0.13?
0.17.
0.17. Okay, so that's freaking nuts. I mean, so that's almost, our average split almost dropped 0.2 of a second. That was our average. Obviously, you have outliers and everything, but by doing half as much work, we got twice the results. And then conditioning-wise, same thing. You know, our guys are in the best shape they've ever been, and just by cutting down volume. So I think you can really, just by taking that away from this is a huge piece. But every coach, and I struggled with it, every coach thinks, first off, they think speed work. If my guys aren't huffing and puffing, they're not getting faster, they're not getting better, which is a complete fallacy. If your guys are huffing and puffing, you're not training speed, period. It's just, their velocities aren't gonna be able to be repeated at a high enough velocity to increase their power. And then conditioning wise, that was the hardest thing for me, was sitting there watching these guys and being like, damn, they're killing it. And being like, this should be harder. Like the inner me being like, the inner, asshole, and being like, yeah, this isn't hard enough, we need to do more. And really sticking to my guns. But by the end of the summer, man, I was just like blown away. I was like, wow, and for the aerobic capacity thing, here's where it really hit me hard, is Coach Bowden is a big fist guy. So when we run camp, we do 5 fists, which you guys all saw that. Okay, so that's a lap around the field 5 times, massively aerobic in nature. So we did that kind of stuff the first 2 weeks of summer. After that, we didn't touch fists. We just ran sprints. We did all the extensive, intensive stuff. So I knew that we would be put to the test that first time we ran fists. The first time we ran fists, we ran 5 of them in the field house here. And our guys freaking smoked them. And I was just sitting there like, wow, this is incredible. Like, you really do increase air. Because, you read it in a book, that's powerful. But results are all that matters. Results are the only thing that matters. So you sit there and you see our guys run 5 fists. And so you've seen, okay, their aerobic capacity went through the roof. You see their weight room numbers. You see their 30 yards splits drop 0.2 of a second. So their alactic power went through the roof. And then their alactic capacity, they're crushing these runs, so their alactic capacity is through the roof. So it's just like, man, this stuff actually works. So our results were massive, and I couldn't believe really how much it helped us. So
what is it also? Also, you hit on it a lot, but with this program, it's really important to understand that Charlie Francis, when he did everything, he was a track coach, so everything was involved with running and his track practice, and he was a coach that did the weights, and he was the guy on the track with him. So when it comes to his running, everything is a direct correlation. So whatever he did in the weight room had to be directly correlated to what he did on the track. And one thing he always stated was to make sure, you do your sport first. Whatever's going to enhance you within your sport, you do that first, and then that should correlate to whatever you do with your conditioning or your weightlifting or whatnot. So with this program, how we did that, it's like someone asked a question about. I think, Sophia, it was you that asked the question about if we did so much aerobic stuff within that first 2 weeks, how did it affect the anaerobic capacity? Well, you have to understand that what we did on the field was a direct correlation to what we did in the weight room. So when we started switching over, the inverse relationship switched with it as well. And that you really have to understand that when it comes to program. You just can't program your lifting and be like, all right, that's it, and then program your conditioning a totally different way. You have to program it almost as one. It's like, we're going to test this energy system throughout this entire phase, and then we'll switch it over and have that relationship going towards the end of the summer, getting ready for football, because this prepared us, for camp. Your summer conditioning, what you do in the weight room is going to prepare you for camp, and what we do during camp and what our coaches do is going to prepare us for the season, and hopefully it's going to make games easy on Saturday.
And the question too is what we need to sit here and ask ourselves now is, we saw such good results with our aerobic capacity through the intensive and extensive tempos. Next summer, can we just do extensive tempos all summer long? Can we start that right from the rip? Or 2, do we need to start it all summer long? Can we just start the extensive tempos where we started them in week 3 and just train in the weight room week 1 through 2, or those first 3 weeks? Just not worry about aerobic capacity. I mean, if this is enough to get them ready, why would we do all that extra if we can be emphasizing weight room recovery? These guys are coming off a couple week break. And that would be my next question is like I said, what I'm trying to find out is, what is the absolute least that we can do and get the absolute most out of it? And if you could tell me, hey, you don't have to run them until week 4 and just do your extensive tempos through that, or you don't have to run the first 2 weeks of the off season, you can just focus on power output, strength, more capacity in the weight room, and then hit them week 3. Well, why would I not do that? Take all that extra volume off them, take all that extra volume to CNS, recovery goes up, they're going to get stronger because of it, they're going to get faster because of it, they're going to get more powerful because of it, so why would I not do that? Now the question is that something that we can cut? And that's where there's arguments. Like I said, I mean, the whole reason I have the aerobic capacity stuff in there is because of Tudor Bumpa and because of his research, and I definitely believe it because I've seen it work. I don't care what you say, I've seen us benefit massively from the aerobic capacity phase. The question is like I said, do we need it? And that's something to figure out and to talk about and to continue to look into, for sure. I mean, that's another way we could potentially improve this thing. That'd be a ballsy call though. That's tough to do because there's only one way to know, and it's to try it. But once again,
Gotta keep your coach happy.
that's why we did this, you know. And I would say the other thing to think about that, I mean, half the reason why I do the aerobic stuff, I'd say at least half the reason why I do it, is because of the mental piece of it. Because it sucks. It does. It sucks. And like I've said before, you know, intensive and extensive tempos aren't going to win you football games. You know, they'll put you in better positions. Obviously, in the fourth quarter, you're going to be able to do some things that other teams can't. But if your team doesn't have some grit, your team doesn't have that mental toughness, that competitive edge, none of this stuff matters. And I don't necessarily believe that extensive and intensive tempos develop grit and develop mental toughness, because they're not as challenging as a freaking double. They're not as challenging as a fifth. So even if you sat there and showed me, you know, a ton of research and results that said, hey, if you don't do this aerobic phase, you'll be a 100th of a second faster at the end of summer, I'd probably say, okay, I don't really care. We're going to do it anyways, because to me, what wins football game is culture, is attitude, is their, like I said, their grit, their toughness. Those things are much more important than honestly science. You know, it's the truth. So you have to have a piece of both, and that's kind of really what I'm thinking about right now is, you know, how can we train smart? How can we train as smart and efficiently as possible, but still, you know, not lose our toughness and not lose our edge and not lose our mental ability to win in life and football. So I think that's a whole other probably episode and everything. But that's just kind of, I mean, these are the things that are constantly going through my head. And you guys don't believe me that I tell you I constantly evaluate everything, but I'm constantly evaluating everything that we do. Like, I don't just sit here and say, hey, I'm freaking the smartest dude on earth and we're gonna do this way. And you know, you understand this was by far the best conditioning program we've ever had. And Green, you've been here for like 17 and a half years now. You would agree with that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, the best program we've ever had, the best overall summer program we've ever had, and all I'm doing is picking it apart. And like I said, you don't overhaul everything. You don't make complete and total changes. But I want to sit there and see where's the 10% of things that I can change to make our program better next year. And sometimes that lies in the what's, sometimes that lies in the how's. But if you're not constantly evaluating and think you've arrived and think your program is you know, the best that it could possibly be at all times, you're just freaking wrong. Now, when we put that product on a piece of paper, that is the best thing that I potentially know. If I knew anything better, we'd freaking do it. But obviously we learn, we grow, we experience, we put guys through the program, we see what worked, what didn't work. You gotta be able to sit there and evaluate that stuff or you don't got a chance. What else? What other questions about any of this stuff? Obviously it's a ton of information, I know, to throw at you guys pretty quickly, and that's like, you could break down to a lot deeper pieces too if you really wanted to, and I'm sure some people will be like watching this going, yeah, that glycolytic phase, oh, let's talk about the Krebs cycle. I freaking get it, people, okay? I get it. But seriously, any questions?
When you look at the type of team that we have, and that's the correct times, compared to another team that may run like a faster paced offense, or maybe even like that utilizes that whole time.
Mm-hmm.
So would you change that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. I would make that specific to them. And same thing with the percentages. If you have like if you have a really fast team, your numbers are gonna be a little different. You know, if you have a slower you know, pro style offense team, you might not be, your 75% is gonna be a little different than our 75%. Same thing, if you're a high tempo offense, you better condition like it. You know, if you condition like this and then you go out and run a 6-second play and take a 7-second break, you're gonna be screwed after 4 plays. So absolutely, that would all change based off of, like I said, these numbers
That was
here,
based off what we did.
these numbers are what we took in 2014. Like I said, we literally had 3 stopwatches on every play going, and so we clocked the average play and the average recovery. Those were our averages at Akron. That's where I came up with those numbers. So yes, those would be. So if I went to a school that was, you know, all fast-paced offense and it was this and that's how we're freaking training. You know what I mean? They better get used to it because that's what they're gonna be doing. So yeah, that's a great question.
Another thing, since we're more of a vertical pass, our wide receivers will run like a 4-yard route and then come out to the sideline.
Yeah.
You take that in consideration too.
I put them in the worst positions possible. So like, you know, those I change them. Like, you know, if this is a 4x10 intensive tempo, they might do a post route down, and then I'll have them jog all the way back sometimes, or I'll just have them reset depending on. Like I said, most of our guys, when we run deep routes, they just get off the field. So for this one, for the most part, with like a post route, I'd have them run the post, they'd reset, they'd run a post back, reset, and they might run like a hitch, and then you mimic the catch and the finish, a dig. So I mix them up a little bit, but I like to put them in 40 plays at the hardest positions they're going to get. I want to put them in 51 of the toughest positions they're going to be in. So deep routes followed by having to go again, and so I want to put them. I'd rather err on the safe side of making them push them a little too hard and not hard enough. At least with that stuff. With that stuff, I want them to have experience with stuff instead of getting in the 4th quarter of a game and then of never being used to what it's like to run 3 post routes in a row because you don't know what's going to happen. So I'd rather them feel that in the summertime for the first time than, you know, at Bowling Green this weekend.
And another thing with just being specific to the team, our mids, the defensive ends who are very, very athletic. Defensive ends usually at most schools would be considered a big.
Right.
But we had them because they're so athletic, they ran with our mids. But I think for our position specific stuff, they pushed the prowlers with our bigs, correct? Or did they lift bigs?
Yeah, well, our defensive ends are like 235, 45-pound hybrids, like Ward and all those guys. So we kind of cross-trained them a little bit. They did the intensive tempos with the mids, but then we had them push a prowler with the bigs.
Yeah.
Just because obviously they still have hand-to-hand combat, they have to be able to push a heavy load. So we would have them push that for the intensive tempos, but run with the mids for the extensive tempos because our guys are dropping, our guys are rushing, and their jobs are a little different. So yeah, we tailor our, and some people break that down a lot differently. What is I like the way Cox does it a lot. What does he does middle? He does
inside the box, middle of the box, and then
Yeah.
skills or something like that.
yeah. So he has inside the box. He has a front. I don't know how he does it, but everyone splits them a little differently. It's really just tailored to their times. You know, our bigs are just our offensive bigs and our D tackles, and then you got your defensive ends, fullbacks, linebackers, and you got your DBs, wide receivers, and backs. So we split it up a little differently, but and honestly, year by year, you know, some years I put our quarterbacks in the skills, sometimes I put them in mids. It kind of depends on what kind we have. So what else?
How seriously would you look at taking out those 110s and shifting to those multiple sets of the 60s?
I'm gonna seriously look into it. I mean, it's not, I think about it all the time. I'll think a little bit harder when we get into it, but I would say there's a much better chance than not that we're doing this next year instead of that.
Because like I try phasic training, so I've been listening to like Cal Dietz stuff, and you know, he works with track athletes a lot. So he's talking about how one of their indoor sprinters, she killed everybody in the 60s, just destroy everybody. But when she come out to outdoor and get to the 100, she'd always get caught and always finish second. So her coach bumped her up to 150s, and by bumping her up to 150s, what it did was actually slow down her first 50 significantly.
Yeah.
So he was like, well, you know, just taking that volume out a little bit actually did not help it.
Right.
Completely hurt her
Yeah.
first 50. So
No doubt. Yeah, I mean, it's something we'll probably, like I said, there's more than likely that we're going to do it. Now, so when we're training here, our main thought is alactic capacity, not alactic power. We're doing other things to combat that acceleration stuff. So it's not my number one thought. Is the alactic power stuff. I'm really thinking alactic capacity, but obviously it's I would say there's a better chance than not that we shift to this. You know. Anything else? Cue the music. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next week.